Okey diyoruz. En son ne oldu? İşte Fela'yı kurtarmak için kendi pelerini yandı, bitti, kül oldu gibi bir şey oldu. Fela hediye olarak Kvot'a kaliteli yünden yapılmış böyle bol bol iç cebi olan bir tane clock veriyor falan. Bunu Joe da söyledi. Ben de şu an söylüyorum. Kvot'un böyle çok cepli olan bu clock'ları sevmesi çok hoş. Böyle bayağı hoş bir detay. Böyle hani saplantı sayılacak kadar çok seviyor falan ama ne kadar saplantı olursa olsun her türlü very good diyoruz. Bu bir. Sonra ne oldu? Birden hop aklına geldi bunun. İşte Fishery yangın patlama bok bir sürü olduktan sonra işte Kelvin ateşin büyük bir kısmını böyle Auri'nin yaşadığı çukurlara cart curt yönlendirdiydi falan. Goldberg'in eyvah Auri'ye mi bir şey oldu falan. Olayına girdi. Hastanedeki kankalarından molayı aldı. Auri'nin yanına gittiler. Auri'ye işte olabildiğince Auri'yi korkutmadan, çekindirmeden sordu. Cevabını aldı ki işte Auri'de zarar yok. Hani fark etmiş patlamayı çatlamayı görmüş. Ama kaçmış, işte saklanmış, bir şeyler etmiş. Bir zarar gelmemiş. Durum bu. Mola'yla konuştular işte. Mola dedi buna ne diye. Avri'yi sen işte üniversite akıl hastanesine götürülmesine yardım etmiyorsun. Neden işte kimseye söylemiyorsun falan. Kvot da şey dedi işte kız bulunmak istese bulunurdu. İşte kendisi mutlu bu haliyle falan konuştu. Tam şu an anlatamıyorum ama güzel konuştu bence. Öyle. Sonuç olarak mola iyi peki şimdilik işte sen haklıymışsın gibi davranacağım benden falan yaptım mola. Sonra bölüm bitti. Oradan devam ediyorum. Chapter 69. Window Woman's Fancy. Orada next to spam, my new clock kept me warm on my occasional walks to Imre, where I was consistently unsuccessful in finding Dana. I always had some reason to cross the river. Borrowing a book from Devi, meeting Trap for lunch, playing at the Aeolian, but then I was the real reason. Kevin sold the rest of my emitters, and my mood improved as my burns healed. I had money to spare for luxuries such as soup and a second shirt to replace the one I'd lost. Today I had gone to Imre for some basal filings I needed for my current project. A large sympathy lamp using two emitters I'd saved for myself. I hoped to turn a tidy profit. It may seem odd that I was constantly buying materials for my artificing over the river, but the truth was merchants near the university frequently took advantage of the students' laziness and raised their prices. It was worth the walk for me if I could save a couple of pennies. After I finished my errand, I headed to the Aeolian. George was at his usual post, leaning against the doorway. I've been keeping an eye out for your girl, he said. Irritated at how transparent I must seem, I muttered, she is not my girl. George rolled his eyes. Fine, the girl, Dana, Diane, whatever she's calling herself these days. I haven't seen hide nor hair of her. I even asked around a little. Nobody's seen her in a full span. That means she's probably left town. It's her way. She does it at the drop of a hat. I try not to let my disappointment show. You didn't have to go to that trouble, I said, but thanks all the same. I wasn't asking entirely on your account, George admitted. I have a fondness for her myself. Do you know, I said as naturally as I could manage. Don't give me that look. I'm not any sort of competition, he gave a crooked smile. Not this time around at any rate. I might not be one of university folk, but I can see the moon on a clear night. I'm smart enough not to stick my hand in the same fire twice. I struggled to get my expression back under control, more than slightly embarrassed. I don't usually let my emotions go parading around on my face. So you and then Sanchez still gives me a hard time about chasing after a girl half my age. He shrugged his broad shoulders sheepishly. For all that, I'm still fond of her. These days, she reminds me of my littlest sister more than anything. How long have you known her? I asked, curious. I wouldn't say I really know her, lad, but I met her, about 2 years back. Not that long, maybe a year and a little change. George ran both of his hands through his blonde hair and arched his back in a great stretch, the muscles in his arms straining against his shirt. Then he relaxed with an explosive sigh and looked out at the nearly empty courtyard. The door won't be busy for hours yet. Come give an old man an excuse to sit and have a drink. He jerked his head in the direction of the bar. I looked at George, tall, muscular, and tan. Old man, you still got all your hair and your teeth, don't you? What are you, 30? Nothing makes a man feel older than a young woman. He laid a hand on my shoulder. Come on, share a drink with me. We made our way over to the long mahogany bar, and he muttered as he looked over the bottles. Beer does a memory, brand sets it burning, but wine is the best for a sore heart's yearning. He paused and turned to look at me, his brow furrowed. I can't remember the rest of that, can you? Never heard it before, I said, but Tekam claims that out of all the spirits, only wine is suited to reminiscence. He said a good wine allows clarity and focus, but still allowing a bit of comforting coloration of the memory. Fair enough, he said, picking through the racks before drawing out a bottle and holding it up to a lamp, peering through it. Let's view her in a rosy light, shall we? Güzel dedi. He grabbed 2 glasses and led us off to a secluded booth in the corner of the room. So you've known Dana for a while, I prompted as he poured each of us a glass of pale red wine. He slouched back against the wall, off and on, more off, honestly. What was she like back then? George spent several long moments pondering his answer, giving the question more serious consideration than I had expected. He sipped his wine. The same, he said at last. I suppose she was younger, but I can't say she seems any older now. She always struck me as being older than her years. He frowned. Not old, really, more mature, I suggested. He shook his head. No, I don't know a good word for it. It's like if you look at a great oak tree. You don't appreciate it because it's older than the other trees or because it's taller. It just has something that other younger trees don't. Complexity, solidity, significance. Anladım diyor. Diyor, scolded, irritated. Damn if that isn't the worst comparison I've ever made. A smile broke onto my face. It's nice to see I'm not the only one who has trouble pinning her down with words. She's not much for being pinned down, Huge agreed, and drank off the rest of his wine. He picked up the bottle and tapped the mouth of it lightly against my glass. I emptied it, and he poured again for both of us. Deej continued. She was just as restless then and wild, just as pretty, prone to startle the eye and stutter the heart. He shrugged again, as I said, largely the same. Lovely voice, light of foot, quick of tongue, man's adoration and woman's scorn in roughly equal amounts. Scorn, I asked. George looked at me as if he didn't understand what I was asking. Woman hates Dana, he said plainly, as if repeating something we both already knew. Hate her? That thought baffled me. Why? George looked at me incredulously, then burst out laughing. Good Lord, you really don't know anything about women, do you? I would ordinarily have bristled at his command, but George was nothing but good-natured. Think of it, she's pretty and charming. Men crowd around her like stags in wrath. He made a flippant gesture. Women are bound to resent it. I remembered what Sim had said about George not a span ago. His managed to get the most beautiful woman in the place again. It's enough to make you hate a man. I've always felt she was rather lonely, I volunteered. Maybe that's why. George nodded solemnly. There is truth to that. I never see her in the company of other women folk, and she has about as much luck with men as he paused, groping for a comparison, as damn, he gave a frustrated sigh. Düpedüz konuşamıyorlar ama bak. Well, you know what they say. Finding the right analogy is as hard as I put on a thoughtful expression, as hard as I made an inarticulate grasping gesture. George laughed and poured more wine for both of us. I began to relax. There is a sort of camaraderie that rarely exists except between men who have fought the same enemies and known the same woman. Did she tend to disappear back then too? I asked. You know, there's no warning, just suddenly gone. Sometimes for a span, sometimes for months. No fickleness in flight like that of wind or woman's fancy, I quoted. I meant it to be amusing, but it came out bitter. Do you have any guess as to why? I've given some thought to that, the said philosophically. In part, I think it is her nature. It could be she simply has wandering blood. My irritation cooled a bit at his words. Back in my troop, my father occasionally made us pull up stakes and leave a town despite the fact that we were welcome and the crowds were generous. Later, he would often explain his reasoning to me. A glare from the constable, too many fond sighs from the young wives in town. But sometimes he had no reason. We are meant to travel, son. When my blood tells me to wander, I know enough to trust it. Her circumstances are probably responsible for most of it, George continued. Circumstances, I asked, curious. She never talked of her past when we were together, and I was always careful not to press her. I knew what it was like, not wanting to talk too much about your past. Çok uzun zaman oldu Kvot'un Kendrick'in bağlantıları hakkında düşünmeyeli. Birden ben de sanki kendi geçmişimi uzun zamandır hatırlamıyormuşum gibi hissettim. Okay diyoruz. Well, she doesn't have any family or means of support. No long-standing friends able to help her out of a tight spot if the need arises. I haven't got any of those things either, I groused. The wine making me a little surly. There is more than a little difference there, George said with a hint of reproach. A man has a great many opportunities to make his way in the world. You found yourself a place at the university, and if you hadn't, you would still have options. He looked at me with a knowing eye. What options are available to a young, pretty girl with no family, no dowry, no home? He began to hold up fingers. There is begging and whoring, or being some lord's mistress, which is a different slice of the same loaf. And we know more than a dozen have it in her to be a kept woman or someone's dogs. Okay, bana ayrılan sürenin sonuna geldik. Şuradan devam edeceğim. Düşündüm diyecek bir şeyim yok. Kendinize iyi bakın. Görüşürüz.